Right, it's my pleasure today. I've got Coni Rathbone, a great friend of, I'm not going to say many, many years because we're just not that old, are we,
That's
Connie?
right.
But I've known the Rathbone family for decades. Her father and I have done many, many deals, and Connie and I have worked on many transactions, complex transactions through the years.
Yes, we have.
And we're going to start off talking two topics today, but we're going to start off talking a little bit about ticks, and ticks sort of got a black eye through the crash, but I want to say that, we talk about lawyers, and some are deal killers and some are deal makers, and we always look at you as a deal maker. And we did a lot of work, actually, you did a lot of work cleaning up a lot of that situation during the crash. And would you mind just saying a few words
Sure.
about your experience going through that? And then the good experience is what you could get done and now sort of saved some of these people too.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, before the crash, we did a lot of work for tenant in common sponsors putting together transactions, and we worked for the sponsors that did good, reasonable deals where they would get $200,000 or $300,000 as a fee on the front end, as opposed to some of the tenant in common group sponsors that I worked for after the crash, where these sponsors were making between $1 million and $10 million on the flip. So in those deals, the clients were buried from day one, and they were never going to come out. And then when the market declines, then they're buried even more.
So they were buying at the top of the market and then marking it up and sort of.
They were buying at the top
situation.
they were buying at the top of the market, for example, for $40 million and on Monday, and then they syndicated it to the ticks for $50 million on Wednesday. Now, I'm not familiar with market increases of $10 million in 2 days, but apparently they had some information in that regard. So a lot of those properties went together. Some good properties with good sponsors failed. A lot of questionable properties with bad sponsors failed. And so I was at Davis Wright Tremaine, and it was about 2006 or 7, and I had one of my Seattle partners refer a group, his neighbor, to me, because this neighbor had invested in a project that had been syndicated by Rob. Let's see if I'm not sure I can even remember his name, but he had one of the TIC sponsor companies back east. Yes. And so he had syndicated about 20 properties, and he was going under. And so he was trying to force, they were master lease projects, and that means that the TIC owners, as tenants in common, bought the real property and they leased it back to the sponsor to operate the business. Yes. And that's the structure that it would be, for example, if it was a senior living facility or a self-storage. Because under the revenue procedure, tenant and common owners can't operate a trade or business. So they would master lease it back. And so the TIC sponsor had come and said, we need to adjust your lease. And he was trying to do it unilaterally. Well, you know and I know that when you're a tenant, the landlord can't just come back and unilaterally modify your lease. And so I started working for this one group with this sponsor. And before you knew it, I was working for 7 groups with this sponsor because they all talk.
Funny how that changes.
They all talk among one another. And so this was just shortly before DBSI, which was the largest tenant in common sponsor in the United States. They were located in Boise. They had 250 properties and 8,000 investors. And so I had done this work for Rob Hanna at Tax Strategies Group. I knew it would come to me. And so I had there was some information out in the internet community. Yes. About me doing this kind of work. And at this time, there was only one other lawyer in the country that I knew that was doing this work. And so when the information about DBSI cratering started coming down, those TIC owners were very, very well connected on the internet. And I remember we were going to Southern Oregon, and I started getting calls from these TIC groups on my cell phone. I was still at Davis Wright Tremaine at the time, and I had talked to about 20 different groups between the 3-hour trip down and the 3-hour trip back. And I told my husband this could really be something. And so within about 3 months, I had 30 groups that we were representing. So that was over 750 new clients. Wow. In these TIC groups. And so we worked things out in one of the ugliest situations I've ever experienced in my practice of law. And as a result of the publicity of all of that, I probably, over a 10-year period from 2007 to 2017, I represented probably 150 tenant in common groups with 35 owners each.
So the thing I want to point out, and we did a lot of work together, and Coni would be working with the lenders and trying to work these things out a lot of times, and all of a sudden, boom, the 11th hour, something happened. And the problem is that a lot of the structure, people would exchange into it, and if they had a situation where the debt exceed the basis, you've got what's called phantom gain, and these people would lose the property. And even
and
though
then have a bad tax
exactly.
result.
So on a residential transaction, you had some tax relief during that period. But if you look at commercial stuff, investment stuff, debt over basis trigger what's called phantom gain, and people didn't know that.
No.
And so at the 11th hour, somebody would finally mention to them, "Gee, do you understand you're going to lose this property, and you're going to be taxed for doing that?" And so what would happen is at the 11th hour, we'd jump into these transactions working with Coni on these, and all of a sudden we'd be forced into doing a dozen or 20 different transactions in a day, creating different special entities, limited liability companies for the clients, it's assigning membership interest and everything pre-foreclosure, and it was this race. And it was, on one hand, it was really tough, like you said, and really felt for these people going through these things. But at least you were doing something to help them. We were trying to help them too, and it was all we could do to isolate them, at least from that tax obligation, those situations.
Right, and the way that worked out is that if we got and thank goodness, knock on wood, thank goodness. I didn't have many properties that we lost to foreclosure. Yeah. Out of my 150, I may have had 10 or 12 or something like that. And, we would be on a call with the owners, and the owners would say, well, at least I get a tax write-off, if I lose this investment. And I'd say, well, maybe, maybe not. For the owners that came in with clean money, their basis was high enough typically to prevent a bad tax problem. But in a foreclosure, the IRS deems or pretends that it is a sale of the property at the loan balance. And because many of these people had done a series of 1031 exchanges, they maybe came to the property with a zero carryover basis. And so if their deemed sale price is, let's say it was $10 million and they own 10%, that if they've got a zero basis, that means they have a $1 million gain that they have to pay tax on. So not only have they lost everything in the foreclosure, now they have a tax situation. And what you're talking about, and it's something that you taught me in this entire process, which is that these people can exchange out of a 1031 exchange, or can exchange out of a foreclosure, just like they can exchange out of a sale. And so the way that works is you create entities, they transfer their property into it, and then you guys handle that as an accommodator, just like you would a sale, which saved them that unexpected tax on the gain the paper gain that resulted from the foreclosure.
Well, a lot of times we'd look at it and say, okay, if you lose it and you get this gain, you get hit with the gain, you're going to lose maybe 38-40%. If you have to come out of pocket to go buy something, how much are you going to put down on it? And you're in a situation where I can pay and get nothing, or I can pay and get something. So it was really strange for our clients, because it's, well, we're not getting any money. How can we have a tax? Well, it doesn't have anything to do with getting any money. And then it's like, well, how can I do an exchange if I don't get any money? It's like, look, we're isolating from that debt component. But anyway,
the way they had to do that was they had to add some cash to the exchange. Just like if somebody was doing an exchange out of a sale, it was not uncommon to have to add cash in order to meet the full purchase price. And that was what was happening here. Only here, the cash that they added was often not more than they would have had to pay to the government for their taxes on their gain.
Exactly. So the bottom line, like I said, there's deal makers and deal breakers, lawyers that do these things. Work with somebody that's going to help you get someplace. And I think more than anything, if you've got investment real estate, you better have some good tax counsel, somebody that's going to help you out, and call them before April 15th. Take advantage of the resources you've got. And I just wanted to, want to talk about, the whole tick world got sort of beat up in this situation. And it's not the tick structure, it was the sponsors. And just work with good people, and things happen. What do they say about history? Those that don't study it are condemned to relive it. So understand going forward, whatever type of passive investment you're going to buy, you want to be working with people that have been through this stuff. So I wanted to take advantage of your time here today. We're going to be talking about opportunity zones. That's what I called her about, wanted her to come in and talk to us about, but I just figured that was a part of our history not too long ago, and I thought if we could take a few minutes just talk about that. But if you're working on transactions, tenancy in common stuff, I mean, if Connie and I want to go buy a property together in Sun River, we should have a tenancy in common agreement, and that stuff just doesn't happen very often. So really take these things seriously, because we buy that property together in Sun River, and I want out of it someday. It's going to cost you some money, and you need to address these things. So plan for these things before you need them done. And I'm blessed to have Coni Rathbone with Dunn Carney here. Good old friend, and a good friend of a long time. I'm sorry.
Yes, I've been practicing law for 30 years. Yes. I started when I was 10.
Exactly.
That's exactly right. So, what you said, David, is very true. The tenant in common structure itself is not flawed. It is the people that are operating. Just like if you're doing a development project or a construction project, the people that you are in partnership with, effectively, that are building, they have to be good, honorable people. And so it is important to deal with you and to deal with me before you sign those documents that you're going to be bound by.
And understand that typically when we're looking at fractional ownership, passive things, we're looking at DSTs today, Delaware Statutory Trust Entities, but there are sponsors that still use the TIC, that structure in value add situations. So we've got some great TIC sponsors here in town. So just be aware out there. Somebody says, "Oh, it's a TIC, it's bad." That's not the case. It's the sponsor. It's what happened there. And I just wanted to take advantage of your time, your knowledge out here.
Well, and my advice on going into a TIC deal in today. Lots of due diligence on the sponsor, of course, because they're the person and the manager. They're the person that's going to be handling your asset. But a big problem that tenant and common owners missed when they were signing up for this is they're buying a piece of real property and they didn't do their due diligence on buying a piece of real property. They bought this as a coupon clipper, thinking somebody else was going to make them a bunch of money. And you should never buy a real estate asset without doing real estate due diligence. And so that's and then if you're going to buy a TIC property, I would prefer to know who the people are that I'm going to be in business with, because although this is not a partnership and we do everything in our power to keep it from being characterized as a partnership, you may at some time have to work with those people like you were partners. And so you need to know that you can work with them. So it's a situation where the structure is not flawed, but how we went into it and how we operate it was flawed in the past. And so just do more due diligence on the front end and make sure you can work with the people that you are going into business with.
Thank you. Good sage advice. Once again, David Moore with Equity Advantage and Coni Rathbone, Dunn Carney. If you're in need of help in that field, please don't hesitate to reach out. We can get you in touch with Connie and her firm. Thank you. And we'll be back in a few minutes with Opportunity Zones.